me to kick us off?
Yeah, let me
All
get
right.
going.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We are excited to talk to you today about the state of the menu. I'm Megan Lindberg, the SVP of Client Strategy here at Data Central, and I'm joined by Claire, one of our fabulous trendologists. She's going to do the heavy lifting today. We're going to go through a couple housekeeping items as we get started here. Our next webinar will be March 12th, and we're going to talk about the operator mindset. And I'm sure discuss some of the challenges, the many challenges that operators are facing, and hopefully provide some insight and guidelines for our supplier community as we all work together. So hope that you can join us on March 12th. Also, I think we're going to move on to some housekeeping items. Nope, we're going to talk to you about where you can connect with us. It is a busy time of year for a lot of us, and Data Central is going to be out in the market. So hopefully you can see us at one of these events. We'll be at the Frosty Acres brand conference in Las Vegas. We have a few overseas conferences. Many of you know we have a global arm of Data Central. So if you are in Spain or Germany, please connect with us at some of those events. If you're into alcoholic beverages, we will be at the Vibe Conference. My colleague, Colleen McClellan, will be speaking there. And then one thing that's also missed, but we will be at the Women in Restaurant Leadership event. That will be at the end of February, so right after Vibe in Charleston. So if any of you are there, please say hello. We always love to see our customers and meet everybody out in the wild, or IRL, in real life, as they like to say. Um, oh, and then there's so much exciting developments going on here at Data Central. Many of you have seen the innovation that we've been doing on our own platform. Hopefully, you saw the release of Consumer Preferences AI that we released earlier this week. Super excited. This is the ability to query our consumer preferences tool with questions and kind of conversational AI and conversational questions and get instant answers. If you're not familiar, consumer preferences kind of adds on to the menu data and helps you understand consumer trial and affinity. So you could ask what the most popular flavors are among Gen Z. You could dig into specific brands. So if you're working with a chain, what do BJ's consumers really love in terms of sauces, for example? And you can look at a myriad of different demographics and insights. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. This adds on to the Report Pro AI that we introduced last year, and really just all of Data Central's AI capabilities that we continue to add to the platform. So lots of exciting stuff on that side. And then this is our housekeeping items. Please make sure if you are engaging in the chat, which we hope you are, because we love to see the discussion. Please make sure that it is sending to everyone, not just to me and Claire, because we'll be speaking and won't be so great at responding. But we do love to see the dialogue that happens in the community, really, that joins us here for the webinar. So just make sure it toggles to everyone.
Okay. And before we get into like the real meat of the webinar, we do like to do our kind of kickoff and try to get folks remembering about the chat, though everyone's doing a great job today. So in on brand for me and the state of the menu, we are starting with some data before I get into the silly it's a poll kind of chat thing. This is from our social media tracking, and I'm interested in this primarily because I was a Girl Scout. I was a Gold Award winner. My daughter is in her first year of Girl Scout cookie selling. So that is an adventure. If any of you have done that, you have my respect. If you were the cookie parent, you have all of my respect because that's like a massive lift. So the peak does start to hit. We'll start to see it jump up in January and February. And I have just been generally curious. This is very much for my own personal interest. We do not ask this as one of our questions because it is so very, very seasonal. So I am curious if what folks have as their favorite Girl Scout cookie. And I do acknowledge that some of you may not be obsessed with Girl Scout cookies, and that's okay. You can say none of these. I don't do that. That's not my thing. And that look, we've got people are excited for Girl Scout cookies, and they're already saying the things they miss. So I'm going to end the poll, and you can see. I think we all know what the top are, but these are the top two sellers too, everywhere that we've seen. So it's of course, your Samoas or caramel delights, depending on where you are in the country, as well as the thin mints. And those are also the two that are most common for collaborations when we look at our launches and rating information. I know thin mints, I think Wendy's just launched their thin mint frosty again for this season. So that's like the most likely for collaborations. The vegan ones are thin mints, actually, Marla. Those are thin mints are actually vegan. And then, in case anyone has their own personal things they miss, I was curious if there are Girl Scout cookies you miss. People have already mentioned the s'mores. I missed the All Abouts. Those were just shortbread with chocolate on the outside. And Megan and I were chatting at the beginning, and this is a nice way into the next section. But over the years, Girl Scout cookies have really kind of switched things up based on like what's happening with dietary guidelines and what people have been interested in. So it looks like I'm not the only one who misses the All Abouts. But that was my personal agenda is wanting to see people's Girl Scout
I love
cookie
it.
things.
I love it. We were out for pizza last night, Claire, and in rolled a little girl with a wagon full of Girl Scout cookies and an online app on her phone. And she
Yes,
was
we
selling,
live in the future. You can
yeah,
you can Venmo me.
yeah,
It's
she
wild.
was selling Girl Scout cookies to this pizza restaurant last night. It was amazing. And quite the entrepreneur I felt like as she was walking through.
Yeah, that girl is she's got a future going for her if she's that
Yeah,
enterprising as a Girl Scout.
yeah.
But I will get into the real reason we are all here, which is not me talking about Girl Scout cookies and partially learning about the dietary guidelines. If you want to take it away, Megan.
Yeah, thank you. So, Claire is going to talk about the state of the menu, but before we get into that, we are going to touch on the new dietary guidelines that were released recently. And as Claire mentioned, we noticed when we looked up retired Girl Scout cookies, there were some low fat options that ran in the 90s, and really, I think, speaks to the evolution that we've seen around health and wellness and how we've tackled that. So, Claire, if you'll advance to the next slide for me. For those of you who are not familiar, I know we're all in food, so many of you know this. A lot of this insights came from we have a couple registered dietitians on staff, so we appreciate them sharing this information. But the dietary guidelines were established in 1980. It's a joint effort between the USDA and Health and Human Services. We are on the ninth iteration of that, and they do last for about 5 years. So what was put into place recently will run through 2020. This is really meant to power things like school nutrition and the lunch program. So if any of you are in that area, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, or if you have kids that enjoy school lunch, you're probably familiar with this as well. So if you advance to the next slide for me. Really, these are meant, as I said, to drive the National School Lunch Program, provide a general framework for what we qualify as a healthy meal, and provide a foundation for clinicians and experts. And so they're released to the public, and you'll see a lot of it, kind of articles and insights. We may see some changes to the school nutrition program as a result of this year's release. So if you move on for me, Claire. This is the evolution, and I don't know about you guys, but this was kind of interesting to me to think back. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, so the initial pyramid from 1992 stuck with me. It was updated in 2005, and they added this figure going up the stairs to indicate some activity as well, and movement and exercise with it. And then we moved to the My Plate in 2011. And then as you've seen now, we're kind of at this pyramid stage again, but a little bit more of an inverted pyramid. And if you go to the next slide, we'll dig into kind of what the current pyramid means and what it's doing. At its core, it's prioritizing whole foods, nutrient dense foods. It's deprioritized foods and packaged items. It is moving protein to the forefront, which is we've all been tracking. Protein is becoming more and more prevalent on menus and more of a discussion with consumers. Also bringing fiber to the forefront as well, which we're seeing. And again, as more of a whole food option than other areas. It also has dairy and whole fat or full fat options a little bit more prevalent. And then again, kind of moving away from highly processed foods and things like sodium and alcohol as well. if you'll advance for me. So we've done some research here at Data Central around the new guidelines with consumers. There is a report available, a hotshot report. So if you're a Data Central subscriber, you can have access to this. I believe it's available today. So thank you to We for putting that together. About two-thirds of consumers are aware and have heard of these guidelines. If you scroll to the next slide, you'll see that in general, the response is positive. About 50% of consumers, say that they do kind of feel pretty good about it. Maybe that doesn't feel like it's impacting them all that much. If you move on for me, Claire. Um, in general, consumers find them easy to understand. And I think they make that a goal by using the pictures and providing the guidelines for it. And then we've got over half of consumers who say that they're going to make either some or big changes to how they eat based on these guidelines. When we talk about what areas in particular consumers tell us they're going to change in terms of their diet, again, it aligns with what we're seeing in that pyramid. So whole foods, so vegetables, fruits, more whole grains in terms of brown rice and oats, again, things that are going to hit on the fiber area. Protein, as you can see here. And then things that we're going to cut back on. So maybe some of those white starches. Full fat dairy is interesting since that is a highlight in the food pyramid and the guidelines that were released. But again, it looks like consumers are going to cut back on that. And then also you can see there the processed foods and the alcohol as well. If we move on, I think the thing we wanted to kind of bring to the table is what does this mean for you all as restaurant operators in this space? And I think that health is always something that's been a subject of debate. I think it will continue to be. I think we need to consider the occasion when consumers are going out of their homes and seeking food. So if you move on to the next slide, Claire. The question is really where this will play in a food service environment and occasion. Most of us are leaving our houses to seek out a specific craving, something we may not make at home, and enjoy the experience rather than, take the time and the effort to cook something at home. So whether this is going to have a big impact for those of you in food service, especially depending on the segment that you work in, I think it remains to be seen. Certainly, if you're on the non-commercial side in K through 12, this is going to have a big impact for you. If you scroll on to the next slide, I think it's also really interesting to understand what consumers say and also what consumers do. So we may think about ordering healthy food away from home. We may talk about it. But at the end of the day, we might actually order that item that is craveable. So while we may think we need to eat a salad or we may want to eat a salad, we may be drawn into that delicious chicken sandwich or burger or pizza that we see when we do go out of home. So, like I mentioned, there's additional information available at Data Central on this. Also, happy to connect you if anybody's interested with one of our experts. But we did want to share that initial information for you. All right, Claire, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, so now we'll get into the official state of the menu for this State of the Menu 2026 webinar. Lots of you have been with us on this State of the Menu journey before, so you'll recognize lots of these slides and some of the findings. So when we get into the state of the menu, I always have this slide. This is like the core slide. Are menu sizes growing or declining? And for many years, they have been growing. We saw that a dip, of course, when menu sizes declined in 2020, but ever since then, they've been slowly on the rise. And for much of this kind of this discussion, this webinar, we'll be talking about items per menu, and that's just what it sounds like. I take the number of items in whatever category it is, and I divide it by the number of menus that offer it. So in this case, it's all of the items in our menu trends, and then I divide it by the number of operators in there. Throughout all of this, I did exclude catering, and I did exclude alcohol beverage. We have a separate one that we do for alcohol beverage. So overall, menus are growing and continue to grow. That's what's currently happening. Getting to the next slide, we break it down by segment, and things haven't changed a ton here. What we did notice is, of course, there was that 2020 dip, and then everybody kind of took a little bit to get back to it. But now we're really in the land of innovation, adding new items to the menu, continuing to do that, and we still see that trend happening. I know that sometimes when there's lots of different things going on in the industry, we wonder, are menus going to contract? Is that happening? We're not seeing any signs of that showing up. The exception here is, as we've discussed before, is that fine dining has clearly kind of just changed their strategy since 2020. They reduced their menu sizes, and there seems to be no signs or interest to go back to those former menu sizes. They've been kind of holding steady at that 89, and that continues to be true. Um, the items per menu by operation size. I have never done this slide like this before, but as I was doing my little chat, I realized I was referencing a lot of things and people would want to see the timeline. So I'll move on to the slide where you can see the actual numbers. The reason we don't do this as of late is that you can see all of the numbers are clustered together. But the reason we want to think about the trend size and why we looked at it separately is for a while, chains were actually, they seemed like they were doing more focused, smaller menus, but that started to change 2 or 3 years ago. And now they really are kind of coming back up, and we're all about at the same menu size, no matter the size of our operation, right? Whether we have 250 units or we have 2 units, we pretty much have the same 140 or so items per menu. And we can see that more clearly on this slide, but you can see that kind of shift on the prior one with the time trend. Here you can see that over the past 12 months, everybody's menu sizes have increased a little bit, but we're all hovering right around that 140 standpoint. So kind of similar things are happening across the industry, no matter the size of the operation unit-wise. And then we get into the state of the menu is important and what's happening and the size of the menus are important. But of course, the most fun thing is to talk about what's growing on menus and what's happening there. Lots of these look familiar. We've talked about this before. I tend to look at these fastest growing terms at large chains, those like really big players, your 250 units or more. Because that tells us what's really, really pretty established trends, what consumers are familiar with. Generally speaking, if I were to like quickly place these for the menu adoption cycle, these are mostly proliferation trends, right? People know what they are, but they're still a great place to innovate. And you can see that by that 1 year growth for penetration and 4 year growth. And then the menu penetration, they're all pretty established, right? There are at least 10 giant chains doing each of these things. So they're still very relevant trends, but they're also still interesting, right? There's a lot of excitement and things we can do here. This one, I'm not going to dig into the examples, but dragon fruit still very much happening. Turtle flavors are still very much happening. One that's starting to kind of show up, and we did see on the nut menu adoption cycle, hazelnut started to kind of grow. So there's a little bit happening from that front too. Wanted to pull in some examples where we actually test these items with consumers. So here we have, this is a very simple menu item. KFC added the option of hot honey to their menu, and it had a huge composite score. 99 is the best you can do. So I think for some of us who've been doing this for a long time, we're like, oh, hot honey, haven't we been doing that for a while? Consumers are still very excited. Don't stop the hot honey as far as they're concerned.
Hot honey and fried chicken. What a combination, especially after talking about our nutrition guidelines.
Mostly what you do and what you say. This is not
Exactly.
for a home occasion.
Exactly.
Another health forward option is one of the top growing fried onion. So fried onion was also growing at chains, and this I think is interesting because fried onion, if we think of like onion rings, it seems so standard. Another description that can happen on chain menus is, of course, like fried onion straws would also have that call out. But I liked this particular item, which was the highest composite score for something with fried onion over the past year. And these are these fry seasoned onion fries. So basically an onion ring, but a change in the format, right? It's more fry shaped and gives something a little bit different that makes it kind of exciting while remaining a bit of a classic. This is new for this year. I didn't look at this section despite splitting them out in the other one, but I thought it would be interesting to see what kind of those more mid-sized players are doing. So these are for our units 3 to 249. So not necessarily your independents and not the huge players, but everybody else. So kind of the bulk of who we look at. And I did go pretty small here. So these are just 10 restaurants or more. But you see a lot of really interesting trends, and they cross a lot of different item types. So things like, we have maraschino cherries being utilized. Honey chicken wings shows up, which chicken wing, as we may recall, was kind of one of the big winners for the past several years. Some other trends, I think, tamarind, we've talked a lot about. And then you have typical, which I do want to take a moment to speak to. I don't think we've gone too much in depth with that. Typical is one where you're like, what on earth is happening? The typical term here that's growing is very interesting, from like 3 to 249 units, because it's doing two things. And it's really doing kind of what Data Central has often talked about, that safe experimentation. It allows the operator to explain what's happening in sort of more common language. So some of it is coming from their utilizing AI to help write menu descriptions, and some of it is wanting to um, further explain what's happening there. So they might say, banh mi typically has X, Y, and Z, and they might explain the build, or it's an option to let them say what might usually come on the dish, but have some wiggle room for supply chain. So it might say like typical side of asparagus, and then you check to your staff person that night, and it turns out today it's green beans. So typical is an interesting one. And then there is a lot of chat. This is Megan. This is one we were talking about. I see the chatter is
Yep.
also intrigued by that one.
By Olipop.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
I thought that one is so fun, that these like probiotic sodas are starting to show up on menus. That's one of those things. Beverages often play a little bit more at retail because they call out brands a little bit more. So something like that you might see earlier at retail, or see from a grab and go at like a fast casual, and it may not necessarily be menued for another year or two. But Olipop has been on menus at least 4 years. You can see that 4-year growth comparatively. So there were a couple people doing it way back then, and it's really continuing to grow year over year.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's a couple others here, but I won't dig too deep into that because we have a lot to cover, and I really love to get into the independents. The independents, this is a section we also do. We have fish salad. Okay, fine. I will talk about one of those. We'll go back. So a couple of these are a little interesting, and I do want to remember. I show the 1 year and 4 year growth for these particular ones because it helps you think about where they might be headed or where they're coming from. So fish salad is a good example. Fish salad has high 1 year growth, but lower 4 year growth. And this tends to mean one of two things when we look at the data. It's either that the trend is slowing, or the trend is just picking up, or it's a fad. Seems unlikely that fish salad is a fad. That would be a very random fad to have taken off. What's happening for fish salad is, when you dig in, it is a bunch of different things. So there's like white fish salads happening on platters. There's actually tuna fish salad showing up. None of the fish salad callouts are actually poke. So there's a lot of different things. But yeah, that fish dip spread, tuna salad, some of those old school deli salad type products are popping with Gen Z as they like get into like meal prepping, and some higher protein options that are just a good budget option. So that one is popping up there. Okay, independence. Independence here, there's a ton in the main report. I do like the whole top growing 45 different items, but I try to pick out some themes, which we commonly do when we look at things. And one of the themes that I saw in the information popping up is compound flavors. And this is a common theme to see pop up in the data. Those combination flavors, some chocolate plus strawberry, watermelon plus lemonade. They're easy things to do and innovate on, and that showed up. And some of these we've seen for a number of years, like watermelon lemonade, I want to say was one of the top ones at top chains last year. So lots of these are pretty established, but there's also some fun ones. I think candied jalapenos are starting to pop up, and I think hot honey helped them get a little bit more attention. And then burnt honey is also showing up. So this is actually a picture of Annalisa Colombo of Batarga. I guess it's a restaurant in Birmingham, Alabama. And I just really loved her honey cake here, which is like 10 layers of sweetened honey sponge cake that she actually ices with a burnt honey and dulce de leche whipped cream. So this is the past 12 months. So all of these are looking at the growth penetration change over the past 12 months. Okay. Did you have something to say about the compound flavors, Megan?
Oh, I just the burnt honey is an interesting one to me. I haven't had that.
Yeah,
What's
it's the first time it showed up in the data, and I always get like very excited when something brand new shows up. So that one just hit the threshold. So I think we'll be seeing some interesting stuff there.
very cool.
And yet, the Russian honey cake I've been seeing pop up places, so I think that we will see some of that. Indian is one we've talked about before, but the data still has it popping up. So egg dishes in general, I didn't call it out specifically, and we will get to actually a couple things from K through 12 menus later on. We saw in what Megan shared that eggs are an area that people are interested in eating more of, especially now that they've come back down a little in price. But we see a ton of egg dish innovation happening on K through 12 menus, and actually eggs are showing up in a wide variety of parts of the menu too. So egg biryani is popping up. Dirty chai, I might be stretching what's defined as Indian here, but dirty chai is growing, and then so is vada. So like the kind of lentil fritters and a variety of different applications. And I did want to note that I think Indian feels so far away, but we are seeing that those younger consumers are very interested in those further out global cuisine. So we just published yesterday or the day prior another one from Hui. He's been busy with the Gen Alpha update, and it said that 62% of parents agree that their Gen Z or Gen Alpha children enjoy trying adventurous global cuisines like Indian, Moroccan, Peruvian. So I think it feels really far out to lots of us who've been watching this for a long time, but the younger consumers really do find Indian to be fairly approachable. European cuisine is another one that was showing up in the data, and this one actually had the most to put in a bucket. It had so many to put in a bucket that we usually try to like pick a specific European cuisine to focus in on, but there really wasn't one singular, like it wasn't just Italian or it wasn't just French or just Nordic that was popping. It was sort of all of them all over the place. These are the fastest growing ones. In particular, there's these Jimmy Nardello peppers, which are really starting to grow quite quickly. They look really, really spicy, but they're actually an Italian heirloom variety, and they're being used and kind of roasted, almost like we were doing shishitos like 10 years ago. Those are the applications that are starting to show up. Sturgeon is definitely popping. That one's a little much caviar driven. The caviar little treat thing is showing up. And then a couple little like lingonberry kind of showing some Nordic flavor. And it does seem to do a disservice to just, again, plop all of these cuisines together and say Latin American rather than like pick a country or pick a specific region. But it really was from all over Latin America that was popping. Though I'd say overall it was actually less Mexico and more other parts, like more South America that was showing up. So these are some ones that are growing. I've talked about this. It's not just an agenda. It was also one of our 2025, 2026 flavors to watch in the trend deck. But piloncillo is really continuing to show up on menus. This is a latte from Not Your Traditional Daughter, which is from Cocoa and Cinnamon in Durham, North Carolina. And it has a cafe de olla syrup with black pepper and cayenne, so a little bit more going on. And then they topped it with marigold petals. Okay. And then we're going to get into more of the item type specific growing. Um, so these are, this slide, I'm going to take a moment and kind of set the stage because there's a lot of numbers, a lot more numbers than we typically show on a webinar. So when we think through the state of the menu, there's, what's growing flavor-wise and dish-wise, like we just discussed. And then there's a focus on kind of like more subsets, the item types that we look at. So far, we've been talking about those items per menu. And again, that's the number of items over the number of menus. And so that's the calculation. So number of appetizer nachos over the number of operators that offer appetizer nachos. How are they increasing how many they offer per menu, or are they decreasing? So if I have appetizer nachos, did I add another flavor? Did I add the option of chicken? Do I now have poke nachos and standard issue nachos? That's kind of what this is looking at. The one side of the coin is, are they increasing what they already offer? And the top winner for this year has actually Wings no longer has the throne. Wings are still doing quite well. They were like 3 or 4 down on the list, but appetizer nachos actually showed up, and we saw glimmers of that over the past 2 or 3 years. And that's kind of support as to why you do want to look at like the different segments and kind of look a little further down, because we saw appetizer nachos growing, and here it is as the top one for this year. And you can see that there's growth both for this past year as well as the past 4 years and the 10 years. So some of these are kind of showing that across all of the boards. So other winners are combos multi-protein. That's going to be kind of your value menu type items. So I offer a sandwich plus a drink plus a cookie. Or it can also refer to kind of the classic, like you might see at a Chinese restaurant where they have, Happy Family and it has 3 different proteins in it or something like that. Both of those fall to here. This is primarily those combos. So people are bundling things more than they have, and they've been doing that for a number of years. You can see that it's grown, even if we look at the 10-year growth. The other thing that's showing up when you dig in is there's more kind of that kind of building value by offering a little bit of choice. So not necessarily bundling, but having like a side, a soup and a salad, or that sort of thing is also growing in this area. Protein sides, the growth that's happening there, that can refer to breakfast sandwiches or breakfast protein. So, like add a side of sausage or bacon. But what's mostly happening here is those more customizable things. So, like the pizza toppings, that's where, meat pizza toppings goes in our platform. So, they're really building out like all the options that you can have for protein sides here, as well as the option to add, like, oh, have some nice grilled shrimp on top of your salad. That's what's driving the growth here.
Nice, Claire. The combos are interesting. Obviously, we've talked a lot about value this year, and we're seeing a lot of combo and multi-protein introductions in the QSR space. So, not surprising to see that grow as well.
Yeah, it does really speak to those like two, like there's the two dichotomies of that value meal as well as kind of the very high end, like surf and turf type
Yeah.
product are both here. Other growing ones, baked potato, which is having a bit of has had some moments on social media, as well as the jacket potato, pie and tart, and then energy drinks.
Mm.
What's happening with appetizer nachos? I did want to dig in for a couple where there's a little bit more meaningful trends that we can maybe execute on. I already kind of did a talk over of what's in the combo proteins, but the numbers weren't like as clean. It was just kind of a couple themes as mentioned. But for the appetizer nachos, there's some pretty clear themes. We see meatless is showing up, as well as our friend Verdilla continues to grow there. Al pastor is showing up on nachos. And then shrimp fajita nachos are also popping, as well as poke nachos. Poke nachos, I feel like poke was one that had a really strong growth for a long time and now is kind of back to growing and being used in different ways. So the poke nachos are also a growing theme. You can see this was Blue Poke who had this particular product just as kind of a Super Bowl specials. And then I did look at pies slash tarts. That one was one that if you looked, you saw the 1, 4, and 10 year. It was a little softer for 4 and 10 years. So it's either kind of a brief little moment to work on if it makes sense for your brand, or it's the start of something new where people it might start to really be an area of innovation. I can't say that I expected pies or tarts to be the area of innovation, but the data speaks the truth. And the ice cream pies are the fastest growing here. And I think that is the key. Yes, the classics are still here, but you can do a spiced apple. You can do a roasted squash. So some of them are call outs, but lots of it is that there's like kind of these new, more playful formats happening in pies and tarts, like these ice cream pies from Lazy Cow Creamery that consumers do love. Okay, here is the other side of the items per menu growth story, right? So here we are doing by penetration. So previously we were seeing, are they adding more varieties to menus? Now we're going to take a look at, are operators adding these as new to their menu? Like last year, did I offer appetizer fries less wedges versus this year? Yes, I do. So that's the growth that we're showing here. The overall top grower is mixed dessert, which we've seen showing up in the data for 2 or 3 years now. It's still really small penetration. Only 2% of operators offer one of these mixed desserts, and it only is really starting to grow. But I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to. And what on earth is a mixed dessert? As we've talked about before, they're basically like the dessert samplers. And this can be really important for your more global cuisine operators who they really, that's where it's good margin usually for adding a dessert. It's usually very good for check menu sizes, but you really want to get that buy-in from your consumers. But lots of times those global restaurants, they none of the desserts are familiar, or they're just kind of throwing a chocolate cake on the menu, which is not what most global operators want to do. They want to show something authentic that really makes sense for their cuisine type. So that's primarily where we're seeing these mixed desserts, is letting people try a variety of Middle Eastern desserts, or letting people try a variety of Indian desserts because maybe they're not as familiar with one of them. And this way it feels safer to try a dessert, because if I don't love one, probably someone else in my group does. So that's kind of what's driving that mixed dessert trend. And then again, we see energy drinks and the combos multi-protein show up here again. And we'll get into those appetizer fries and wedges and what's happening there in a moment.
I love the mixed desserts or the little, some of the restaurants will do the little desserts, like little shot glass desserts.
This, I feel like they're poised to come back, right? They're like almost a throwback for some people who've never seen them before, like the youngest consumer. And I feel like the rest of us, it's kind of a phase I miss. Like, why not bring it back? It's a good way to get a little bit more ordering from people and let them linger a little longer, have another drink, all that good
Yeah.
stuff. So I think
Seasons
we'll
50
keep seeing those.
I think it was Seasons 52 that used to have those small ones. Because then it doesn't count. Feels like it doesn't count if you just eat a little.
Or if you get just, a sampler to share with everybody, that can't
Yeah.
possibly count if you have one bite of each. That's not the same. But what definitely counts as far as a nutritional option is your loaded fries, which I feel like loaded fries were a little quiet for a little bit, but they're back to showing up from a penetration standpoint. People are adding them. They're a good way to kind of just have another appetizer, a nice shareable that it feels approachable. So they're growing again in penetration. For this, I did look at the 4-year penetration change, and I just wanted to think of kind of some more established trends for these now growing in penetration. So these are just the varieties. I didn't look at toppings. I looked at just varieties. So garlic butter is like the whole build, kind of like sometimes they're garlic butter parmesan. That's showing up. Euro fries have been showing up for a bit. Indian shows up again here. The masala fry is really starting to grow. Carne asada is showing up, and then all of your item as flavor. So Philly cheesesteak fries are growing, and as you can see, are really predicted to continue growing another 25%. So they're small now, but if you have those ingredients, it's an easy thing to add to a menu, a pretty simple build. Or if you have a favorite dish, always, throw it in some fries, and then you have another option.
Claire, is that Crystal, the quick serve restaurant? Is that
Mhm.
Philly steak? Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, these did quite well. They had like a 98 composite score, so like a really strong item for being a fairly simple build.
Yeah.
And then for this, I wanted to look. So we saw that side soups was growing in penetration, but I didn't want to look just at side soup because what happens with soup is typically the trend actually starts in appetizers, or sometimes it's entrees and appetizers, and then it'll move to the other, and then finally we do it as a side, right? The sides tend to be the least adventurous of the soups. So thinking kind of more broadly what's happening for soups as we see that growing as a side, because there's no reason we can't have an adventurous side soup. It's just not as common. We tend to showcase those as appetizers just because that's who offers them. But there are plenty of people doing really innovative things with side soups. So some of the growing soups on menus our chicken tom kha, which I highlighted a picture of here. You can see the penetration is predicted to really grow almost double over the next 4 years. So it's really tiny right now, but it's a pretty approachable soup, works for a lot of dietary needs because it's it's typically coconut milk. So this particular one was a dairy-free one that my brother and I went to a restaurant week lunch here in Chicago, and this was actually the side, which I'd never seen that served at like more of an American, new American type place as the side option. So it was soup and a sandwich, or so it really felt kind of innovative because that was not what we expected as our soup option. Other ones that are growing are gazpacho, cucumber, which sounds like an ingredient, but I did dig into it. So those are like your really classic cucumber dill yogurt type soups, or more like cucumber walnut, were the growing flavors. Pork wonton as a call out, and then chicken corn soup are the other ones growing for soup varieties. Okay, a couple other key categories to watch that not aren't necessarily happening across the board, but maybe you play in one of these particular spaces, or this is really relevant to one of your particular product lines, so it's worth knowing. Usually, things will grow in one space before they grow overall. So I looked to see kind of what was uniquely growing across segments because I do this whole process for every single segment. And some of the ones that were growing for items per menu, and I feel like I've seen this more. I don't know if you've seen this, Megan, like cool Sundays, another one that I didn't expect showing up, but it's happening at mid-scale, which is like kind of a classic like Sunday dessert place, but
Yeah.
then also at fine dining. So there's lots happening with Sundays.
So the fine dining is interesting because we went to Maple and Ash and the desserts were really kind of interesting, but maybe a little bit too like above the head of my kids. And so then they did a Sunday bar. They brought them
Oh,
out like ice cream and different toppings. Yeah.
I think, yeah, there's a lot of happening with Sundays. I was very surprised for that. And then cookies and brownies are also growing at fast casual. And that was one of the themes overall in the state of the menu, which is the will release soon if you're a Report Pro subscriber. It's not yet out there. This is the initial. I'm still finalizing some of the overall results. But there is, and this was also true last year, that fast casual is really focusing in on what fast casual does for the most part, like what they do best. So they're expanding their cookies, they're expanding their brownies. Those have been key products for them for a long time, and they're continuing to increase the offerings. From a penetration standpoint, appetizer quesadillas are showing up on quick service menus. Traditional plated type entrees are starting to grow on fast casual menus. So beef main entree and chicken main entree. So it's like chicken with gravy, or this is a steak chimichurri is showing up. And then lastly, iced coffee is showing up. I think I wrote fine dining, but I actually believe it's growing at casual dining. It's growing at fine dining, but the sample's too small to really say for sure. But they're growing at casual dining. So iced coffee has made its way kind of to more of like a beverage staple. I did dig into Sundays because I wanted to see what was happening with Sundays. Some of these make sense to elevate things caramelized and salt, lemon, and then sorbet. So it's not just Sundays have are no longer just ice cream. They're actually kind of doing some other things. So this is a sorbet Sundae from this Cypress Social in North Little Rock, Arkansas. And then there's also like brownie sundae things happening. So like Blondie is being used just to kind of jazz up that classic brownie sundae and make it a little bit different. And sometimes that feels lighter. A Blondie should not feel lighter, but it kind of does. Something slightly different. And then new this year, we have a new report. It released early January. We've got the state of the on-site menu. So we're closing all of the restaurant stuff that we've talked about, and I'm going to dig just a little bit into what's happening at on-site. And as Megan noted, with any shifts in nutritional guidelines, that can always impact on-site. So who knows what else we'll see, but we'll see what's happening here.
This is exciting to have the on-site non-commercial data, Claire.
I'm excited for it. Hopefully somebody finds it helpful. It was really fun to dig in and to kind of look at this long trend line. So we did the same thing here. I did the same thing that we did for restaurants, but this time by the on-site segments that we track. So at least we track, these are the ones we track for our menu data specifically. So as you can see, kind of C&U has continued to make what they offer for food a focus. And that makes sense, right? There's a lot that, you look at when you look at picking a college, but sometimes the differentiator, if places are tied, having a good food experience when you go there can matter. It definitely matters to students as far as their happiness on campus. So they are continuing to increase their offerings. K through 12 is actually ever so slightly increasing. The long-term care facilities, that is the only area that we're seeing some declines. And I think that makes sense. We saw actually a lot of like hope and excitement for some new food programs there maybe a decade or so ago. That started to decline, but there's still actually lots of innovation happening as far as what's growing, and we'll take a look at that. It's more that when you look at the menus, the long-term care really focuses in on the items that do well, and then they tweak the flavors within there. So they're not necessarily adding an additional chicken entree; they're just switching up that chicken entree every now and again to keep it interesting. So for each segment, I did do the same thing here. This is a little bit of a different measure. So I use the 4-year compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, and that's because the on-site does tend to go up and down a little bit more. They're impacted very heavily by, supply chain, changes in legislation, budget, like it is challenging to be an on-site operator. And so to kind of soften some of the trends and make sure we're really finding things that are meaningful to think about, I used this compound annual growth rate, so that it's things that had consistent growth over those 4 years. So for K through 12, we've got street tacos. Of course, tacos are always a classic. Boston baked beans showed up. Somebody must have come up with a good product, because that one was like very clearly called out. Chicken Cobb, and we see al pastor showing up as well.
Mm. The global influence again in K through 12.
Yeah, lots happening globally in kind of all of the spaces. And we see that again showing up for C&U. Again, Bahia shows up here. Smash burgers are showing up, chicken chili, and then chicken Philly. And we see our butter chicken, that Indian cuisine also shows up. And we did do a look overall in that report on kind of the overall what's happening with like terms that are from global influence, and they are showing up across all of these on-sites. So there's a lot of innovation with global flavors. The cuisine of focus varies by operation, of course, by these segments, but there's lots happening with the global flavors. Even when we go into something like hospitals, some things that are growing for hospitals are barbecue pulled pork. Gumbo is actually showing up there. I guess that is kind of comforting, and you can kind of fit a lot nutritionally into it. Waffle is showing up. And as a reminder that like we can have things that read as unhealthy on these menus that are focused on nutritional. Something like a fried chicken sandwich, there are ways to make that, fit into the nutritional needs of a place. And also for almost all of these places, they also are feeding their staff. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of balance to be had with these menus. Both things are being addressed, but when you can have that balance, that does start to show up. And then I feel like edamame feels like something kind of new and exciting from a produce standpoint. If a hospital served me that, I would be much
Yeah,
surprised. So
yeah,
that's one that's growing as well.
it's impressive.
And last but certainly not least, long-term care. One thing you will notice probably very quickly when you look at this long-term care slide is that these 4-year CAGRs are much lower than what we saw on the others. So it's very hard. The growth here is slower. It is, probably the ubiquity stage of your on-sites. Things take a little bit longer, but there is a lot of activity and interest, it seemed, in things that can work as like a main dish or to layer flavor. So hummus and dip callouts were also growing. Risotto. These are like kind of a sad thing to talk, but like there's soft foods that are also delicious and really interesting to like make into something fun. So those are also growing on long-term care menus.
I feel like we could tie this to some boomer trends, some consumer data.
I mean, honestly, those all sound great to me. I wouldn't be mad with risotto or hummus for
Yeah,
a meal.
maybe not the hot cereal, but
I don't, well, we won't get into that, but I've been into like chickpea hot cereal, but that's neither here nor there. The point
oh,
is, let's get into the summaries. So there was a lot to look at, a ton of data, a bunch to think through. But the kind of key takeaways are, despite all that's going on, menu sizes continue to grow across nearly all segments and operation sizes, with the exception of long-term care. At major chains, many long-term trends continue to grow, right? So that includes things like hot honey, s'mores, passion fruit, dragon fruit, and even pulled pork. Compound flavors, Indian, European cuisine, and Latin American are all growing trends at independents, which is where trends typically begin. When we look at overall item types, some to watch are nachos, combos, that's kind of like value items, and then of course energy drinks. And last but certainly not least, on-site menus have many of their own trends, and that shows the potential for innovation in that channel within all of those different segments if nutrition needs are met. So it's not everyone's wheelhouse, but there's lots of room to innovate if it is one of your wheelhouses. All right, and more housekeeping.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take this one. So Data Central is compiling our top 500 report. And if you are a restaurant brand, we would love for you to submit your data to be represented in this report. This is where we track the top 500 chains and we look at sales and unit growth and segments and what's growing. So please, if you hear from our team, please complete the information or complete the submission that we ask and help us make this a valuable report like it is each year. So you should be seeing that from our team soon. And then don't forget to join us on March 12th, where we go inside the operator mindset. And I think that's it for us, right, Claire? I
Yeah,
think
we're a little early today.
we are. So everybody gets 10 minutes back. We've spent 50 minutes talking about food. So hopefully you're hungry. And if you didn't eat lunch, then you have the opportunity to. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you all in March.
Yeah, thanks everyone.